Okay, so you're here, ready for another deep dive. And today, well, we're tackling something fundamental, really.
hmm That question of what actually turns a good company into a truly great one.
Exactly. And we're digging into Jim Collins' classic work, Good to Great, to see what insights we can uncover.
It's really about understanding that leap, isn't it? From
hmm
just being okay or even decent to becoming exceptional.
It is. And Collins, he starts the book in a really interesting way. He talks about his own conviction in the findings.
Oh, right. The whole, what would it take for me not to publish this thing?
Yes, that part. He describes being out on a run, thinking about the, 5 years of research?
5 years, yeah. And a team of like 21 people working on it. It was a huge project.
A massive undertaking. And he asks himself, okay, someone offers me $1 million to shelve the book. Do I do it?
And the answer was no.
Right. Then he thinks, okay, 10 million. Still no. It keeps going up. 50 million.
No.
It wasn't until he got past like $100 million in his head and still felt he had to publish it. That tells you something, doesn't it?
It really speaks volumes about how important he felt these ideas were. That level of commitment, wow.
Absolutely. So that core question, why do some companies make that leap from good to great? It drove everything.
But the idea for the book, the actual starting point, it wasn't just him waking up one day thinking about it, was it?
No, not at all. It actually came from some pretty blunt feedback, apparently.
Ah, yes, the dinner party critique.
That's the one. Back in 1996, Collins is at this dinner, and Bill Meehan, a consultant, I believe, starts talking about Collins's previous book, Built to Last.
Which was already a bestseller, focused on companies that were successful long-term.
Exactly. Companies that were kind of always strong. And Meehan says, great research, well written, but
Here it comes.
he called it useless.
Ouch. That's direct.
Pretty direct, yeah. And Meehan's reasoning was that Built to Last focused on companies that were, in his words, mostly always great.
Okay, so the IBMs, the GEs of the world, perhaps. Companies that never really had a just good phase, maybe?
Right. They were the perennial winners. Meehan argued, well, what about the rest, the companies that are just good? What guidance is there for them to actually get better, to make a leap?
So the criticism was that Built to Last didn't offer a practical path for companies starting from a position of adequacy rather than inherent long-term greatness.
Precisely. Meehan felt it was like studying, Mozart or Shakespeare to figure out how you could become a great composer or writer. Interesting, maybe, but not that helpful if you're just starting out or are merely competent.
That makes sense. It didn't address the transformation itself.
Exactly. And Collins admitted, yeah, maybe useless was an exaggeration, but the point, it really hit a nerve. It made him think differently.
It suggests that becoming great isn't just about doing more of what makes you good. It's a different kind of change.
Right. It might require a fundamental shift. And the source material uses this analogy that I think really clicks.
Yep.
Imagine someone, okay, they've got a decent education, they land a solid job, maybe at a big, stable company, earn a good salary, let's say $60,000 a year. Life's pretty comfortable.
Yeah, for a lot of people, that's a good place to be. Stable, secure.
Totally. But the point Collins is making through Meehan's critique is that this very goodness can actually kill the drive to be great. You get comfortable.
Complacent, perhaps.
Yeah, complacent. Things are fine, maybe even better than for many others. So that burning desire, that hunger to push for something truly exceptional, it might just fade.
It taps into that idea that real growth often comes from discomfort, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Being too comfortable can lead to stagnation.
That's exactly it. The source even says suffering drives improvement. Maybe suffering is strong, but, challenge, dissatisfaction.
Certain productive tension.
Yes. Without that tension, that feeling that good isn't enough, you risk getting stuck. And that's the parallel with companies they hit good, and the urgency to push towards great just evaporates.
Okay, so that critique, that realization about the trap of good, that became the real catalyst for good to great.
Bingo. Collins formulated the central question. Can a good company leap to become a great one? And importantly, this wasn't just a philosophical question. It kicked off some seriously rigorous research.
With very specific rules about how they'd even identify these companies, right, to keep it objective.
Absolutely critical. The first rule was all about the timeline. They didn't want companies that were always great or just had a quick surge.
Right, they needed proof of being good first. For how long was it?
15 years. A company had to show 15 years of performance that was, solidly good, but not outstanding before any kind of transition.
15 years. That establishes a clear baseline.
Definitely. Then there was a transition period, which could vary. And after that transition,
They had to be great for another sustained period.
yep, at least another 15 years of documented great performance.
So 15 years good, transition, 15 years great. That really filters out the noise, doesn't it? Like lucky breaks or short-term trends.
Exactly. It accounts for different CEOs, different economic cycles. It aimed to isolate companies where something fundamental and lasting had truly changed internally. It wasn't just about timing the market well for a couple of years.
Okay, so you have the timeline. But then how do they define good and great? That feels like it could be subjective.
Good point. And they knew that. Subjectivity wouldn't cut it for this kind of research. So that brings us to rule number 2.
Which was?
The benchmark was purely based on financial performance, specifically cumulative stock returns.
Okay. Hard data. Makes sense.
So for that initial 15-year good period, how did a company qualify based on returns?
Their cumulative stock returns had to be basically at or below the general market average, right? So not terrible, just average.
Exactly. Keeping pace with the market, maybe slightly underperforming, but definitely not leading it. Solidly good, not great.
Okay. And then to be classified as great for the 15 years after the transition.
That's where the bar got significantly higher. They needed extraordinary results.
How extraordinary. What was the threshold?
The company's cumulative stock returns over that 15-year post-transition period had to beat the general market average by at least 3 times.
3 times the market average, sustained for 15 years. Wow.
Yeah. 3x for 15 years. That's a really clear, undeniable marker of outstanding performance. It takes the fuzziness out of greatness.
It moves it beyond just feeling like a company's doing well or having a good reputation. It's about delivering significantly superior long-term value compared to the average.
Precisely. As they mentioned, your local bakery expanding might feel great, but for this study, they needed that standardized, tough financial metric. Cumulative returns capture the total picture stock price, dividends reinvested, the whole thing over time.
So that objective measure, combined with the long time frames, really created a robust framework for identifying the specific companies they wanted to study.
Absolutely. So just to sort of wrap up this initial setup, the whole Good to Great project wasn't just an academic exercise.
No, it was sparked by that very pointed critique. The idea that just studying winners doesn't help the ones trying to become winners.
Right. And the methodology was key. Finding companies with that specific 15-year good, then 15-year great track record.
Defined by that really high bar of tripling the market returns.
Which sets the stage perfectly for asking, okay, what did these companies actually do differently? What were the common factors?
Which is what the rest of the research dug into.
Exactly. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening. We've talked about the setup, the rules, this idea of pushing past good. How might that apply, personally? What does great mean in your own work or your own projects? And maybe more importantly, what's the good enough that might be holding you back?
That's a powerful question. Moving beyond comfort zones, whether it's a company or an individual.
Definitely something to chew on after this deep dive.